Hello, hello. Welcome to 119, week 5. I am your usual host. So let's get into it. What I want to do is just go over the stuff you need to know for our upcoming project. Definitely going to be a fun one. Storyboarding. Storyboarding is something that people in games and film animation industry does prior to much of its work, cinematography in particular. So through the slides here, film language part 1, film language part 2, we're going to go over some of the foundational aspects of that and professional aspects of that. In particular, I'm not going to actually guide you through each slide in a very concise way, just because I think it'll be better if you simply go through the slides on your own, watch the videos, etc. But I do want to be somewhat of a guide. So I'm going to talk about what is expected of you for O2A, and I'll show an example from a previous student. So first and foremost, I will do a brief run through of some of the basics here in film language part 1, after which I'll allow you to go through part 2 on your own, just so you can get a better sense of some more advanced topics and the like. So let's get into it here. So it's all about how to tell a story visually. That is the main premise I'm trying to instill in your burgeoning minds. So Lifted by Pixar 2006, and like I said, I'll let you go ahead and run through that, watch it, and I want you to notice the variation in shots, essentially. Shots meaning the actual frame. So if we look at this as a frame, we can see that this is a close-up of sorts, right? You have the sort of foreground here, and a nice composition as well. We're angled in from the right to the left, guiding us to this fellow here, and then at the sort of almost thirds point, remember the rule of thirds, right? We have our sort of protagonist here, looking down in sadness, and perhaps what I'll do is I'll let you go through this one. Maybe I will do a run through of another upcoming video slide. But when we look at these videos, pay attention to the variation of the shots. This is very important for storyboarding. Getting those key shots that's what will set your sort of introduction scene apart from someone else's introduction scene, right? Getting particular points across at very key moments, and it's cinematographic. So you're looking at these shots as key moments to which a potential cinematographer, you as the animator, would impose upon the animation, upon the film, etc. So O2A as a project is something that you will be putting together as a means towards defining how your introduction scene or cutscene in your game will look, key shot by key shot. Now in editing, we have shots and more shots, but these are all sort of key moments that we want to tackle, right? You're not going to be storyboarding every single frame. That would be insane. And that's actually not even really what an animatic does. An animatic is just kind of using the storyboard, and that would be O2B, your O2B project. You would be making an animatic, basically taking the storyboard and then animating just in a very slight way. So maybe you zoom in a little bit, maybe fade out, maybe pan across, maybe zoom out a little bit, right? And we'll get more into that. A good example is actually that Gorillaz music video. I have an animatic that you can watch for that. Anyways, and I believe I have that in part 2. The moral of the story is make your shots varied. Some being from above, some being from over the shoulder, some being close up, some being far away, mid shots, right? And we'll dig into a couple of those while we're at it here. So shots. These are basically the sort of key factors in creating this variation. They are the key frames, right? Shot size, position, composition, movement, the setting of the lens, what's the light in the scene like, etc. This is what you want to start thinking about for your O2A projects, key frame by key frame. Please note that the end product, or O2C, is actually going to be a sort of 30-second introduction. It could be a little bit longer if you wish, but for the most part, keep it at 30 seconds, right? You don't want to overscope. So let's take a look at shot size and position. So if we take a brief look at this one here, this is a good example to kind of do a little run through. And just to reiterate, you're making a 30-second introduction or cutscene, if you want to call it that, before your game begins. So this would come after the title screen. So once we press start, we get thrown into this lovely animation that you make, and then we start the game. Let's just play this real quick. So here we have a nice sort of wide shot here. We have a sort of close-up right there, right? We have a huge establishing shot right there, which just makes makes it that much more dramatic, that much more hilarious and disturbing. And we cut out, right? This is what I want you to think about. How can you use frame, the shot size, the shot position, etc., to create more drama? Obviously, that created more drama by throwing in an pretty almost extreme close up. We had some medium shots in there too, and we had one full shot, which was just like the roller plus the guard. Another one here you can take a look at, and just look at the close versus the mid versus the other shots. There are many different ways to go about it. I'm just going to briefly go back here. So medium shot, essentially we're going to go through all of these here. This extreme long shot is also called an establishing shot. Most of the time you'll see this in the sort of beginning of an animation, beginning of a movie, where it just kind of sets the scene with this giant shot of perhaps an entire city or an entire city block, etc. Those are pivotal towards creating a visual setting for your audience before you even get into any drama. We can actually, let's just take a little break here. Let's take a little peek. See, this is an establishing shot right here, right? We are in a giant mountain range. Now, normally what will happen is, it'll go in a little bit closer. Eventually it cuts to a sort of mid shot like that. Another long shot. Almost a close-up, but not quite. There's a close-up. Sort of extreme close-up, really. And we're fluctuating between mid and close.
It is a strange fate.
But going back to that beginning there are many ways to do this. So here we go from establishing or extremely long shot to a sort of close mid shot. and then to a actual sort of mid to long shot, right? The mid to long shot being this clip here. So this is your mid to long shot here. And we're gradually getting kind of closer and closer until we get to that, close shot of the actual ring here. So those are techniques I want you to think about as you move forward. How can you kind of ease into these sort of shots from an establishing shot? It's the first shot in the film, very setting oriented, helps us understand the greater picture, etc. Not going to dig too deep into that. Mulan, 1998, right? Nice sort of long shot here, and over the shoulder long shot. Nice establishing shot here with Princess Mononoke. And then you have your long shots. Subjective distance. Consider the distance between audience and theatrical stage. Imagine sitting in the front to 10th row during a play, etc. This is a long shot, right? A little fuzzy on the image there, but you get the point. Feel free to watch that at your leisure. Another long shot here, Akira Kurosawa, Ran, 1985. Subjective, keeps the subjects in the scene, keeps the actual close quarters, not only the subject, but the actual things they are doing. It keeps that in view, in perspective. We have the specific category of long shot. Think full shot, full body. Human figure is framed head to feet. So this can frame a single character or a group. Very similar to long shot. Hard to tell sometimes which one should be which. Medium shot, definitely framing in the subject here. Equivalent to the distance of framing a character from head to midriff. We had a lot of those in that Lord of the Rings situation where I said, oh yeah, it's about a medium shot, etc. Framing two characters, this also can happen in medium shots here. Oops. Let's just get back to where we were. Yeah. The three shot, framing three characters, that's probably almost edging onto a sort of full long shot. Spike Lee, Crooklyn. Nice medium shot there. Juno, medium shot. Juno again, medium shot. And then we have the close-up, just like with the Ring, right? Or with the security guard in that Austin Powers flick. Yeah, you just need to frame the head, essentially. It doesn't mean showing a head, necessarily. Like in Lord of the Rings, that close-up was a ring, right? In Austin Powers, it was the security guard's head. But it forces the audience to notice an important detail, and that is the main takeaway here. It's giving rise to importance for particular things that you, the artist, wants people to see. Such as in Casablanca, right? This is a very tense moment, very romantic, but also, it's an important one to note. It's an important sort of climax. A little bit of Welcome to the Dollhouse, close-up. Extreme close-up. Definitely most dramatic of all shots when used properly. The extreme close-up, it can vary, and it is powerful, though. Talk about detail-oriented. If you need an emotion to come across, or you need an object to start saying something like that ring, which I would argue is kind of an extreme close-up in that Lord of the Rings little clip there. It's still kind of a close-up because we have the view of the people in the back, but it does get pretty extremely close, and that is a detail that the director or the cinematographer thought was, and the concept artist that made the storyboard thought would be very key towards that particular scene. We're going inside of objects. We're going right up and butting up against them, really. Meshes of the Afternoon, Maya Deren. Extreme close-up of an eye, even with a little bit of an eyelash coming off to the right there. Where the camera is, also a major factor. Is it a high angle, an eye level, a low angle, oblique angle? These all give rise to not only importance, but power. Power is huge here. When we talk about a bird's eye view, in many ways, okay, it's an establishing shot, but also we're talking about omnipotence to some degree. Being above a certain situation, right? Giving the audience a feeling of awe, perhaps, but also maybe they are the ones that are, they feel more connected, as if this is the world that I should be a part of, type of feeling. A very sort of godlike, omnipotent feeling. It can be disorienting, it can be abstract, it can be very abstract, etc. But yeah, puts that audience in a godlike position, and the subjects are always made to look ant-like, tiny, insignificant, etc. Excuse this disorganized slide here. A high angle, Psycho. Psycho used this a lot psychologically for just kind of experimenting with how can we, take this sort of technique to another level. How can we create something that will have a major effect on the audience emotionally? Are there things we can do to do that? And High Angle does that in a very good way, mainly in a sort of empowering way. Not necessarily omnipotent way, but definitely like an overpowering way. It's above the action, can be used to give a sense of general overview, of course, but also important of the setting or environment surrounding the objects. That importance increases a bit. So there we were on a staircase, right? A kind of formal environment, it looks like. Movement is sometimes slowed down. And you would have to kind of catch that, right? So look closer at this versus a low angle. And it's also good for conveying a sort of tedium. Reduces the subject's height, and we're empowered. We're put in a power position. It reduces that importance of the subject. And the person's going to seem harmless, insignificant, even threatened. Definitely effective for conveying a sort of self-contempt. Here we are at eye level. Nice mid shot here from Drunken Angel, Kira Kurosawa. Eye level puts you on the same playing field, a sort of neutral shot, right, with the subjects. Whether it's an animation or a film, etc., it's placed at eye level with the subject, and therefore gives the subject a sort of normalcy. Subject becomes ordinary. The audience is left to make its own judgment on those characters. It opens up the door, so to speak, to possibility. Changes the direction of the audience intention slightly. Perhaps we're trying to relate a little bit more with the character, right? If you want your audience or player to relate with your character more, throwing in a couple of eye-level sort of shots is going to have that effect. Dr. Strangelove, definitely doing that there. It empowers. Low angles empower. So be aware of that. When empowers the character, not the audience or player. It gives that subject more importance, power, dominance, and sometimes more than they should, right? So you have to be careful with low angle. Background tends to be sky or ceiling, separating the subject from its environment. And it's going to be used to give inspiration, fear, insecurity in the audience. So if you want your audience to be fearful or insecure, low angle is good for that. But in a way, it can also be used to actually create a sort of awe-inspiring feeling as well, if used correctly. such as looking at an aurora borealis from below in that regard, right? It's a majestic, beautiful experience. It belittles us, but it also gives us this weird sense of being. Not a sense of it takes us out of our world, right? And that can be good and bad. So the over-the-shoulder shot, which I've mentioned briefly through that Lord of the Rings presentation or clip there, you're literally shooting over the shoulder of a character. The back of a character's head, shoulders are visible at one side of the frame. Rest of the frame is filled by what has, the character's attention, and we join the character in the experience. We have empathy for the character, right? Here we are with E.T. If you haven't seen E.T., you got to get on it. It's fantastic. Love the little Reese's Pieces situation there. It's just so funny and kind of cute and strange at the same time. So we're becoming empathetic, right, for E.T. And in a way, we're becoming empathetic for all the characters in this frame. Used for conversation, so great for dialogue, switching between one person talking to the next, but mainly used for that emotional effect and trying to bring importance to what is said, but also bring emotion to what was said. So shows the listener when the reaction to what is said is important. Vertigo. A couple of climaxes here, right? So definitely a good spot for that. Point of view. Also shot that portrays the sort of point of view of the character and her actor. It tells us what they are looking at. Definitely overused in B-horror movies. Here's Halloween here, John Carpenter. Through the mask sort of point of view. But it works, and it was innovative for the time, and in a way it can still be kind of, I think there's still room to grow in that regard. Things can be made more dramatic by not showing them. So perhaps we want something to happen out of frame that maybe it's heard, but it's not exactly seen. And this is actually something that comics do very well, where you have these gutters and we the reader, we the participant have to sort of fill in the gutters, so to speak, going from one sort of experience to the next, one panel to the next. What happened in between, right? And they would call this a sort of diegetic space where you're filling in the gaps. You can literally hear what would be there, or you can see what would be there, but in your mind, right? The oblique angle. Terminator 2, Judgment Day, James Cameron. Just a wild, we call it oblique, Dutch angle, but also it has to do with foreshortening, right? So it's something that's coming at us. And in that sense, it gives a sort of feeling of imbalance, sometimes instability. Great for action flicks. This technique is often used to suggest point-of-view shots, frequently used in film noir. Here we are with, Robert Wine here, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920. Silent film, but most definitely a part of the avant-garde type German expressionist movement. If you've watched Sin City yet, like I've advised you to, you'll see a lot of these angles in there. And yeah, sometimes it gets cheesy. You gotta be careful. But once some innovators come along, they can kind of give rise to a resurgence of these tactics and give their own interpretation, which in a way that should be you, right? You are the newcomers, the new innovators of this sort of space. Then And that is all for part 1. Go ahead and peruse these. I want you to just point out to yourself what the long shots are, what the close shots are, etc. And with that, I'm actually going to go to our content page again for week 5. And I want to just briefly go over the storyboard example. So here, this is the template, the same template you'll be using. Ryan Huntley, you'll notice I had an example of his work for O1B in the prior week. This will help you understand what to do for O2A. So remember, we're making a 30-second introduction cutscene, basically. You go to the title page of your game that you're making this semester, you press start, and we get taken into this sort of cutscene, which then leads us automatically into our actual game. And then we begin to play. So I want you to write a sort of narrative of sorts for it, making sure that there's some kind of conflict of sorts, etc. Conflict being maybe between an obstacle or definitely between whoever the sort of general goons are, if you want to call them that. In the platformer template that you'll be using in Unity, the example I have actually set up for week 1. If you wanted to take a look at the top of week 1, I think I have it in overview as well, and it could be in one of those other resources. I'll point it out before we leave the video. Essentially, there are these sort of red gumdrops that the player is going after. Perhaps those red gumdrops come from, these evil red gumdrops come from some evil Santa situation, right? That's what I'm getting at. So you can have one big boss guy, but really we're just going to be focused on the sort of goons of that boss. So, and that'll be your sort of main enemy. But the overall antagonist could be something larger than life. Up to you. Obviously, you've already known all this per O1A, per O1B, but I just want to reiterate that this here is just the beginning shot. Yeah, he wanted to keep it simple, and he's into that. Here we have a sort of establishing long shot. I would say maybe it's just not in a long shot, but an establishing shot. Establishing shot again, but with the leaves, kind of the cherry blossoms blowing off and coalescing here into, and notice how we're zooming in a little bit closer each time. So establishing, a little bit closer, coalescing force of leaves, and a little bit closer. Now the leaves have made a character, right? This is sort of a nice medium, perhaps long shot here. So I would actually word this as establishing into long. And now we're getting closer to a medium shot. Definitely a medium shot. Sort of close up as he goes to grab that lantern. Back out and panning right. Now we're kind of sticking to a long shot format. Let's say that's a long shot still. And then it just goes to a dark screen. He has something that he wanted to establish there. Back to the close-up. Hands a little closer. Now we have a spirit that's becoming more visible, perhaps is going to become a part of the scene shortly. And then a close-up of the feet. Yeah, pretty much explanation is all right here, but just something to take note of. and then back out to a sort of establishing shot, right? And fade out with this. So varied enough. I think it would have been nice to have maybe one more, maybe a shot in between here and here. But that's okay. They were successful in kind of giving the overall feeling of what they wanted, and that's all I want you to do, right? So in that way, go out and do this. The example is there for you to see. Peruse part 2. Part 2 is going to highlight particular features, most notably composition, and underlying structure of said compositions. And I'll just do a little brief here. Right, trying to find a sort of grid dynamic, finding your angles. So here we are splitting the thirds as these meet at the third. This is your center. This meets at the other third, right? Think about the rule of threes. Think about the sort of golden rule as well. And think about how you can make things balanced. And let's go through this golden section. So bisect one side of the square. Draw a line from the midpoint of a side to an opposite corner. This line becomes a radius of a circle. Where the arc intersects the line as the sought proportion. A over C equals B over A. Vitruvius Man, Leonardo da Vinci. Compositional hotspots or areas of interest are at the intersection of those lines, which is the third. Third, 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 third. Rule of thirds. Side of the foot. Putting a brightest color here. A bright color there too to draw the eye across at an angle. This one's okay, but not the best example. But definitely, we want people to focus on, that part of the B. And we want the B to be sort of the main subject here. Use breathing space carefully, but definitely use it. It's very important. So which direction did the bee come, etc., right? I'm not going to go through this, but this is something that you can kind of dive into, kind of like with Stanley Kubrick's films where you have a lot of center-oriented cinematography. The rule of thirds is very prevalent in his storyboarding and his cinematography. So yeah, peruse this. This is something that's going to be invaluable to you moving forward. I want you to really look at these. I'll keep track of if you have looked at them. If this is an async class, and I'll just kind of grade you on participation in that light, because this is very important as far as 2D animation goes. This is vastly important in regards to knowing these sort of concepts for not just better design sense in general. And notice how all of these sort of shots are, from, looks like this video's got a little bit of a glitch there, but couple interesting. All in all, run through them, see where you can get at, and make sure that you can sort of, find the compositions within. So here's Stanley Kubrick. Losing the title on my mind here, but suffice to say, another centered shot, right? That's what he does. But he's really good at it. Notice that we have the sort of third here, right? And we have a third here. Center. Lines coming in there, and there. And it's very simple to do a center shot. Don't do too many of those. It's not hard to do. So just be careful how you use that. Make sure there's enough variety in your work. Moving on to the rubric portion, I wanted to just point out a couple of things. So here's your storyboard template. Very similar to all the other templates, except, and I will expect you to change up the font styles and stuff like that. I want you to treat this as if you're actually going to pitch it to somebody, right? Get into it, get serious about it. Maybe change the color of the background, etc. As well as, maybe this is a more of a decorative font as a header. Perhaps for body text, you have a different font that's a little bit more elegant, a little bit more simple, but let it match your theme. Just like Ryan did here, all right, and here. So something to note, something to hold on to as you progress. And it's just a sort of minimum of 10. I'm expecting that you do a little bit more, but yeah, minimum of 10 sort of shots in addition to that title card there, the narrative treatment, and finally make sure that it's in the Dropbox. Anyone with this link can view it. Paste it into the Dropbox, and I'd like you to upload your personal logo for your game. Make a logo for your game. Give it an identity, right? Give it a brand of sorts. This is going to help you really feel out the overall mood of your work in many ways. And hold on to that as you move forward. It's kind of like Watchmen, right? In Watchmen series, you have that sort of smiley face with like a little splash of blood, and you'll see that smiley face not only as a sort of logo for the work, but also for the as a sort of way of looping in a sort of symbol into the narration, into the story, into the dialogue, etc. A visual looping. And that symbol is carried on and actually acquires meaning the more you see it. Give your logo that type of attention moving forward. With that, if you have questions, please reach out to me. I know some of you still have a 1B to hand in. Please do that if you did not already. And watch all, look at all, and play games, have fun. Overall, give yourself some license. Don't fret about, oh, my drawing skill is horrible, right? I'm not grading on that. You want to, when you're putting this together, you want to make sure that you draw it out. It could even be on paper. It doesn't have to be digitally done like Ryan did, right? It's totally fine if you do it on a blank piece of paper. Ryan did his digitally, so therefore it's very clean. And yes, it would be cleaner if you did it digitally. However, I'm not against hand-drawn things. So, in fact, I promote it. I want you to be more tangible. I want you to feel out your games in a much more intimate way. And this one way to do that is to storyboard with a pencil and paper. So if you do it in that way, make sure that when you take the photo of each sort of key shot that you've made, make sure that there's plenty of light, the image is clear, and there are no shadows or what have you intruding on the actual shot that you've drawn. And if you have any other questions, reach out to myself or the TA, and have a wonderful evening. Farewell.